Check, check. All right. I think all these work. So, yeah, everyone can come on over, and I'll have everyone, because I'm not the best with names, and I'll tell you the reason why. Multiple reasons. Go ahead, Dondre, come on over. You next to me right here.
Brothers, what's going on? Sisters, 1, 2. Okay, sisters.
So, I'll kick things off, though. My name's B. Moore. My name's Robert Moore. That's my government name. All my friends call me B. My name's Bobby Jr. That's from Robert. So my family used to call me BJ when I was younger. My homies didn't like that, so they just called me B. So I'm telling y'all that because the reason I had this talk is because I'm just gonna rap with y'all like I would my friends. I don't even have anything really scripted, and I'll let everyone introduce themselves, but I've invited a couple people up here that are also my brothers. I highly respect them, their intention and the work that they do, and their passion and understanding themselves is so deep. And understanding yourself is such an important thing. So when someone understands themselves, they walk with a different type of light. And there's a connection in conversation and energy when it's shared when someone understands themselves. So I've asked these two gentlemen to join me because they understand our collective identities. They understand their own walks in life and their own paths, but we have this interconnection through this work and our own identities in a brotherhood that's been formed. So I'm extremely honored to have everybody in this room equally, but I'm especially honored to have these two brothers up here. And the reason I'm having them introduce themselves is because I want them to do it properly. We didn't script this shit, and my homie to the right, I would probably butcher his name too, so I don't want to do that in all due respect because a lot of us are connected on social media. Some of y'all I might know from a small little circle picture or an Instagram handle. I don't know your government name. And I don't want to be like, hey, this is so-and-so at, follow him later, but you should. But yeah, I'll let my brother to the right introduce himself first, and then my brother to the left, and we'll kick things off.
Peace, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you to the Thinkspace family for having us. Be More, of course, amazing work. My name is Badir McCleary. I'm a curator, consultant. I also run Art of Urban Reality. Happy to be here again. Love the Thinkspace family. Loving B's work. We talk all the time via social and being out of it. Excited to learn a lot more. Got a lot of questions. I always do. But just going deep on the art side. You know, we talk a lot about the social side of how we interact with artwork, but we never really get a chance to go deep into the art side. So I'm looking forward to reliving or revisiting some artists that I see, you know, from the works that are very iconic and a lot of different things. So I'm excited to talk about it. So looking forward.
My name is Dondre Whitfield. I've been an actor for over 40 years, author and interpersonal coach, and now art enthusiast. And my wife and I just love this brother's work. We had a spirited debate about what we were going to purchase next. But just in terms of being able to have a conversation with him about this series and what it really means to be a young man coming out of the mud. Art was something that I learned about. You know, I did when I was 15 years old. I did a television show called The Cosby Show, and the first time I saw art or really understood that you could have art. I saw a piece of art on Good Times, a show that I watched when I was a kid. And then all of a sudden, an episode where on The Cosby Show, Claire is buying a piece back that belonged to her family. And I said, wow. So not only do we do art, but we can actually collect art. And that really resonated with me. We have an 18-year-old daughter, a 14-year-old son, so now I'm like, okay, we gotta open up this door for them. and know that this is actually like not only some beautiful thing that reflects who you are, but it's also an asset that you collect.
I really appreciate both those perspectives because, you know, I'm an independent artist, and I say that because this is similar to the music industry. You can get into contracts and, you know, the verdict might be out whether those are bad or good, but I really think in like strategic relationship terms, and still holding on to my independence. So being able to work with the gallery and getting the freedom to be able to create this body of work and still hold on to my freedom, but build genuine relationships without feeling mutually locked into anything was really cool. And to hear the understanding of how art's produced and how assets are acquired, especially for people who have been under-marginalized or have been denied access to acquiring assets, is actually the root of this work. A lot of this is rooted in our identities, our struggles, and ultimately how we rise up through the mud and find joy and acquire assets. So just even speaking to that for a second, and we'll open it up for Q&A a little later, and we're gonna have some natural dialogue. I'm kicking it off based on one thing I just kind of wanted to speak on, an overview, is the way this is my first solo show. I've only been painting for about maybe 3 years. I got sober from cocaine and alcohol in 2019, and around the same time I did a DNA test. And being black is beautiful, I've always said that, but when you can actually have like an identity or connection to certain tribes and areas, there's just another level of beauty that's presented and identity. And for me, it was being able to understand people that were my kinfolk. And so all those things happening at once connected me to my people, physically and non-physically, but very spiritually. And I feel it when I paint. Like, it's like that feeling in church when someone like has a real good sermon and you're like, you start crying or you get chills, like you just like, I feel that every time I paint. And if I don't, then it's just not the day. But I usually do. And so I had to share that too, because as I developed my first solo show, I don't really know what I'm doing. And I think there's actually some beauty in that. Because I don't have this prescription or a textbook. I'm like a kid in a sense, because I've only been to museums and shows in the last few years. So I don't know what's right and I don't know what's wrong, but I'm very in tune to what I feel. And so this work was developed based on my feelings and my experiences. And so as I started to think about my identity and that DNA test I took, I've done a lot of research. People that I think create good work, the painting and the creation part is like the last part. It's the research and the hours of finding and sourcing and developing work that's felt that's actually the most important. And then the painting is like at the very end. So for me, it was like sitting down and being like, damn, let me look at art like I look at music. Melodies are great. I tell my kids this. If daddy walked around the house and said, la, 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 even though I don't sing very good, you may like it, but eventually you'll tune it out because it's mundane. But if I have symphony, which doesn't have lyrics, and the reason I'm mentioning that is because it doesn't need lyrics, but symphony has emotion in the music. And so without lyrics, you can feel it. My favorite hip hop is storytelling. It can be a great melody, whatever, but if you ain't telling a good story and delivering bars, this is how I did this work. And I'm so glad that my manager who's in the audience, Kendall, and Hebrew Brantley, who's someone that's, you know, OG in the game, but has also kind of maintained the independent path, shared some feedback for me as I was starting, before I even knew I was gonna do a solo show, because this was like 1.5 years ago. But they gave me the feedback to say I need to look at developing work kind of like Kendrick Lamar in Good Kid, Mad City versus The Pimp a Butterfly. It's the same artist, but he has two different sounds from both those bodies of work. So I actually dissected all of this work on tons of scratch paper. I like had this beautiful mind Russell Crowe moment where I'm like chicken scratching and writing everything out based on how I came into this world. Because as I back up a little bit, I shared with y'all I did my DNA test. And as I was learning my DNA and my roots, I was also learning some of these tribal and ancestral experiences. One of those is a rite of passage, which isn't just specific to Africa. It's actually in Europe and other places too. but it's a coming of age, and it's a ceremony, and it's a journey. And so I was thinking about being black in America and being born here. I'm not really sure what our rite of passage is in a formal tribal sense, but I know what our rite of passage is just being born black here. Some of us are born without a parent. Some of us are born with drug addiction and turmoil. And that's why I started it out that way, is I started out based on my inception when I came into this world with an absent parent. And I won't go real deep with every piece, but I just wanted to just start this by breaking down some of the works, so then it'll open up conversations specific to certain works, etc. But I started that out. Black community doesn't have the best relationship with water, and most of us know why. But when I thought about a message in a bottle, I didn't think that that felt like very connected authentically to the black community. But when I wanted to get a message out to an absent parent, I thought it was more natural to throw a paper airplane in the air and hope that they get it. So that piece was kind of like really emotional, but foundational for people understanding how I personally and a lot of us have come into this world with some parental or environmental turmoil. And then we go through this linear, this is my intro track of the album. And you go through the room in a linear fashion. It was intentionally curated that way. So you go through these points of growth where I describe how we are identified, coming out the mud, looking like animals, what's the most threatening, to this evolution of my work even, being conceptual and coming out the mud and going into a sculptural sense, to the piece that's behind me, which is Hoop Dreams Deflate. You know, I still would take y'all to school in basketball. Anybody says they would beat me, whatever, we can play. I got a bad knee too. But I still think I could be in the NBA. Call me crazy if you want. I think a lot of people in here think they could. And a lot of us are in that false idea, because there's such a small percentage of people that actually make it to the league, race aside. And we put so much weight into it, into hip hop, into rapping, into basketball, and making that is actually not very high percentage. So some of these pieces are representatives of that journey. And again, I won't go real deep with every single piece, but there's a correlation between the adolescence and the innocence and the trauma and the journey. And as we turn, we kind of come into some references of how important it is to procreate. There's another piece over here that speaks to every day a star is born. Even though there's been a lot of trauma and death, our procreation rate is higher. So it's my way of encouraging that. And as we journey along, it's a linear story, a memorial wall, military point, that coming of age, brotherhood. Brotherhood's important because that's my reference of community. You go through all this trauma and you try to stand on your own, good luck. You gotta have a brother or a sister. And without that brotherhood, you can't even achieve happiness. You gotta get that. So then that's how you get your flowers and find your own footing and find your own happiness. And eventually, which is a real story for me, now I'm using art money and I'm looking at acquiring my own land. Because I'm also being educated by collectors who are like financial advisors, real estate. I love the free game, I love learning. So as I'm over here doing art, I'm arting, and they're financing, or they're real estating, I'm like, give me free game. So I understand where we had access denied for wealth. And that's why land, which is something that isn't being recreated, there's not any more of it, has been a focus of mine, and that's why that's the ending piece. I wanted to give that overshadow because it has redirected how people approach this work. Some people started in opposite direction, and that's okay. There was no prescription. I just wanted to share with y'all the intention so you can understand. I also wanted y'all to understand the shit that I came through, the mud I had to get out of to find my happiness. And even though this side's heavy, I wanted everyone to leave with some joy. But I believe art should be felt and not just seen, and that's always going to be an objective of mine. So that was just kind of like my overview I wanted to share with y'all about the work before we got into any specific questions or anything.
Yeah, I wanted to add on to what you were saying, also what the brother was talking about with the Cosby Show, with the Ellis Wilson piece, which was, kind of digging back to Claire finding herself, her family, understanding that that was her late uncle. So reaching back to your DNA discovery, your playing a collector role in your own life. You're collecting your own stories. You're collecting your ideas to formulate them in a way that we can understand. So what I'm interested in, I guess, an opening question of mine is, what does DNA mean to you? That, I know you say, you're thinking of the rite of passage and things like that, but like the actual DNA, how does that make you feel connected? Does it make you feel connected?
I think for me, I've always grown up, and I feel like this speaks for us collectively, but I'm open to feedback too, but we've always been searching for answers and truth. A lot of the shit that we've been learning has not been the truth. So when I think of DNA, it's a sacrificial event. I'm a data guy. I come from technology. I know what that information is being used for. I'm not super excited about that if I were to be, but I'm not gonna go down a rabbit hole about that. But I was really interested in learning more about myself. I would not have painted a focus on African diaspora and hairstyles in 2020, which was such a cool way for me to learn about the history of our hair. I learned, but I also got to paint. So we learned. That's what DNA meant for me. It was a way for me to find who I felt like was missing, even though if I were just to look at DNA in itself, I know it wasn't designed for us. It'll probably be used against us.
We were talking in the back about this piece where, our young brothers in this helmet, and my wife and I we walked around the room, and of course, every single piece in the room was just devastatingly expressive and gorgeous. I was drawn to that piece because, as I said to my wife, that's me. I grew up in Brooklyn. People think that they know your story based on what they see from you. They see this guy on television, polished roles, have no idea about the mud that had to come before the polish. Because before I became anything that I ultimately became, I had to be a soldier first. And I stood there in front of that piece, and I looked into the eyes of that piece, and it was like I was looking at myself. My father, the first person I ever saw get murdered in my life, I was 8 years old. My father went to prison for manslaughter when I was 13 years old. So that piece right there is so brilliant because you see this vibrant colored shirt, which should signify the experience that a child should be having every single day. But then you see that helmet that's too big for his head. He shouldn't have to be soldiering where he is right now. The chin piece is like over his mouth, so it prevents him from even expressing all the pain that he's going through. You see this little flower that's like coming up out of this mud, which, how is that flower even growing in this hostile environment? But if you look at all of us as black men, we are that flower that comes out of all of that hostility. So I just want to know, one, how you get into the mind of someone like myself when you create these pieces. And then what inspires you to say, this is the expression that I'm going to put on canvas today? Is it something that you remember that's triggered by a specific, experience that you had when you were a child, something that your children are going through, something that you see on, in the media? How do you get to that?
How do I answer that? That fucks me up a little bit.
Those tears,
Yeah.
those are the same tears I had the night that I got in front of that piece.
I've looked at that for like 5 months, and I created that. And the way you described it is exactly the way it's supposed to be interpreted. But we've never talked about that piece. So, man, this caught me off guard. It just caught me off guard hearing you talk about it, because that every single detail that you explained was exactly what was intended in that piece. And the details I put into my work, there's so many layers, I don't explain them all. That flower is us, you know? And so I've always said this. The people that follow me know that I talk about flowers, and my dad's always had a green thumb. So like talking about, you know, even storms and wind and how the best, like you need it. If you just had a plant or a flower, anything that just never endured any weather conditions, it'd be so weak. Like it literally is why plants and babies are so fragile in their infancy, and they need to be blown around a little bit, because that's how they get their girth and their strength. And so, but that's why I had him up here too, both of these brothers, because I knew that they would have perspectives from the art perspective and also the heart perspective. That like, there's some passionate conversations that me and Dondre have had that like are so deep that it's like I'm talking to myself. And I talk to myself a lot. I'm in the studio by myself.
I do the same thing.
Well, I got a question actually for both of you brothers actually. So when we think about mud traditionally, we think of mud baths, we think of makeup, you know, being able to change cosmetically. What does the mud mean to you as a form of growth and as a form of detraction? Because we talked about Good Times, we talked about Cosby Show, both shows on the opposite spectrum in a sense. So where you're showing the art of advancement and the art of regression in a sense. Two beautiful artists. So what does that mud mean to you as far as your growth and as far as a hindrance?
Well, you'll notice the mud is usually at the lower like portion, so it's not ever above the shoulders. And for me, the shoulders is really the biggest way down point. It's when you lose control, your body has been taken over. And so having them right below the shoulders or right at the torso has always been kind of subconsciously intentional. Plus, I don't want to cover up the figure, but like the mud for me means both. It represents the rose that grew from concrete, Tupac poem, was like reference. I could put that literally in the caption on every single one of these. I don't do it because it would just be like overkill, but I had a piece that was titled We Rose, so it was like perfect for it. It was like my second piece I did in the series, but yeah, that's where it came from. It was it's always hip hop. It always goes back to hip hop for me. That was my first art form. And real storytelling, real bars, you know, Tupac being more poetic, Biggie being more storytelling and raw and relatable, that's the two sides of the mud.
And it's very interesting because I don't know if you know, but throughout this curation, you invoke the artist Thomas Kassouf in a specific work of One Chair, Three Chairs. I don't know if everybody's ever seen that, but it's an installation where he has a chair, a picture of a chair, and a definition of what a chair is on the exhibition. And if you look at the works, even the mud work, there's a smaller version, there's the bigger version, and there's the definition. Why did you take a trifecta approach to your work? Because it's consistent.
It is, and thank you for asking that. I've only been doing this for a short amount of time, and I'm blessed in that because I feel like it's just beginning. And I say that humbly too, because tomorrow when I go back to my studio, it's going to be like my first day. Every day is like my first day. Ain't nothing changed. It's just I get to really do this. So I gave you that preface is because these smaller pieces that you see next to some of these works, I only started those about a year ago. I haven't quite done them on every single piece, but as I understand art as a business, I'm a stock owner, and I want to be the biggest stockholder of my stock. And so there's a few reasons. It's art, but also business, because I love my own shit. I want to keep some of my own stuff. I need a prototype. It's also because I'm self-taught. I came out in 2019 and was like, paint big, yeah. Like swishes and swooshes and Man, I couldn't sell nothing. But in art school, as I've learned, because I'm self-taught, I didn't go to art school, is you go through these trials and tests, and you try different mediums, and they force you to go through a lot of different things so you can discover yourself. That's what I'm doing. I'm trying new things, discovering myself. I'm also building a practice. So these smaller works are for me. It's also an interesting social study because they pull people in, and me as an art admirer, I actually noticed these smaller studies in a larger work at Art Basel 2 years ago. I can't remember the artist's name right now, but I loved it because it was looser brush strokes and a little like, it wasn't as tight. But I fell in love with the smaller work, and I inquired about it, and they said it's not for sale. And I love that. I love they said no. Even though I wanted to buy it because I was like, wow, I was drawn in by that. And I didn't even want to ask how much the big one was. I wasn't ready for that. But it was understood. So I know this is a long answer, but this is experimental. These studies are prototypes. They come home with me. They're never for sale. But the trifecta was also an experiment because I wrote those in crayon, which is like what a kid would do. And since I have an expressionism element of my work, even though it's figurative, it was a way to be expressive. And
do you feel that you were immature in that expression, hence the crayon?
I did it before it was painted. On every single one. I mean, I do these all the time. Sometimes it's just therapy. I got journals of these little notes. It could be about my ex-wife, it could be about my kids, it could be about me. But it's just journaling. But that note that I wrote was so strong, and it was really true to me because I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. In fact, I didn't even know until 3 years ago. I'm in it now. I'm in it. Yeah, so then I was like, when I see art in people's homes, I don't usually see a display card or the title. Sometimes they know, most time they know, sometimes they don't. But I thought it'd be really cool to have an art collector or an owner have that title, but have it be a separate piece of art, still complemented in their home.
You said something earlier about how your background is data. And for so many of us, the challenge for me in life is that I think it's our job as human beings, but as Black people, sometimes we get so caught up, pardon the reference to the mud again, about being caught up in the mud that we get stuck in survival mode instead of evolution, right? The challenge for me every single day is trying to listen to who I hear I'm becoming every day. So, truth be told, I didn't choose acting for myself. People around me chose it for me. They said, man, you are talented, you're expressive. If I were you, I would become an actor. And because you're trying to grasp onto something that is your ticket through and out, that's ultimately how I came to acting. There was an author in me that was begging to come out, and then there was this person that can't stand to see people struggle. So on any corner, if I see someone struggling, you will see me helping them to find the other side of it. So much so that my kids, my daughter's 18, my son is 14, they will take their phone out and go sit somewhere because they know this is going to be at least about a half hour or 45 minutes while Dad applies his purpose work. I'm unabashed about it. It annoys my wife. That's her journey. I gotta honor this. In coming to that part of it, how did you get to this space of honoring the painter that was in you that was begging to come out? How did you get to that point? 'Cause
And
that's scary.
There's a lot of noise, I think, too. And so, it was scary. And I mean, that's a tough question to answer. I usually can answer most things. I will say, I was focused on myself. This was my solo show, but I also represent a community. And even though I try to be gender balanced in the way I uplift us, especially black women, this was about me. So this was like the first time I was like, man, I really want to put some more girls in here, but like, I'm a black boy and I have those boy experiences. And so I wanted to reflect myself. And most of these photos, almost all of them, are people in my community. They're black boys in Iowa. There's not a lot of them. So I got to learn and know and have a relationship with each of these figures. And the process was organic too. So I think I learned myself as I was developing this work, Dondre, to your question. And even now, as I'm talking and looking at the work, I'm seeing a different version of myself. This has been an evolving experience. This is my first solo show. I can certainly say this beats what I envisioned, but this is at least what I envisioned. So what I envisioned as a visionary and as a creator, I saw how this whole room was laid out. I knew that these were going to a museum someday, even if conversations are still happening. Like, I believe it so much that I think as I was developing the work, I was also finding myself and getting those validations. But the part that was more important, I think, than the validations, it was the conversations like what we've had and me and you have had around how the work was understood.
Yeah.
It's got to be similar to when a musician puts out a song that everyone loves and someone's like, yo, I grew up just like that. Yeah. You pull them aside and you hit them with that.
I mean, it's, what you two are describing in my sense is, you know, this exchange of emotional sculpting. You know, you speak of the trajectory as an actor and you're saying, friends are saying, hey, you know, you're good at this, you should be this. They're lending their hands to your mud. You know, with him responding to your paintings, he's lending his hands to your mud. So in a sense, you guys are exchanging that formation of the mud. So these works is helping us to sit up here and build each other. You know, like
really glad you said that.
No, it's. I mean, how many times do we really get to see three brothers sit up here and talk
About art.
about art?
About art.
You know, and just to emotionally sculpt each other. You know, I'm trying to figure out what these pieces mean to me from understanding what they mean to you. Seeing his reflection, his response, it takes me in a different way. And looking at the mud, and we mentioned all these different ways that mud is used, we forget the formation of it. You're taking your old mud and creating something new. Same thing like with cosmetics. You're removing that old face mud mask and giving us something brand new. And I appreciate it. And I think to have someone to speak very eloquently about it as a collector of yours completes that triangle of, you know, you, your studio, the response. Again, a trifecta. So when I'm looking at these three things, I look at the intent, the action, and the execution. What do you think is the most important part of that process for this show for you? Because we mostly hear about intent. We started to talk about the execution, but let's talk about the action. How does this action of going out and meeting these black kids in Iowa, having the response that you've had to your first solo show, you know, what was your intent?
I think this is the first time I got a big smile, because I mean, this has been a pretty intense conversation, but this was intense work. You know, I'm an emotional dude, so I've cried, I've been serious facing, now I'm smiling real big because first thought of that was this piece right here with the pink background. I got a video, I haven't posted it yet, I've maybe shared it in my stories, but this kid's mom is like friends with my publicist. This is one kid I haven't met in real life, most of them I have, but I've got to know him. And I asked his mom, I was like, can I paint that picture of your son? He's radiating black boy joy. She's like, absolutely. So I painted it, I sent the picture to her, and she showed it to her son and got it on video. His reaction, He's like, wait, what? He's like, I'm gonna be in a museum. Now he said museum, even though art gallery is semantics, but nobody was there to correct him, and that's beautiful. He's like, I'm gonna be in a museum. I can't wait to share this video with y'all so y'all can like really see it, but he's like, I'm gonna be in a museum. I mean, he's running around, falling on the floor. I ain't even sold the work yet. I don't know if it's gonna be in a museum. In fact, I know it's just going to a gallery, and fingers crossed it does sell. But his excitement to see himself amplified, recreated, and put into a public space was currency, like, it was a new form of cash. And these kids that I've got to know, and their parents hit me up and being like, yo, thank you. And I'm like, thank you. And what they don't know, I actually cut checks for every single parent. I'm not even saying on no bragging shit. I'm saying that because it's a surprise to them. I never say this first. I just see if they're cool with me painting. Every painting I sell, their mamas get a check. Yeah. So that's been a different connection. It's been like at the kid level, but also the family level.
But I think his excitement was like, not just the museum, you saw the value in him. You know, like the museum is already in his mind.
For
He
sure.
got to be in the place.
I think, you know,
You know what I mean?
a part of all of it, and this was my experience just in seeing each and every one of the pieces, is so important for all of us, for us at some point in our lives, for us to be seen. Like, do you see me? Like, when you see someone, when their lights really get turned on, is when they realize that somebody sees them. As an interpersonal coach, when I'm working with people, I work with people whose lights are either dimly lit or completely off. And it's the saddest thing in the world because they don't know, void of you knowing what your purpose in life is really walking around dead. Because I don't care what your belief system is, whether you feel like the universe created life, whether it was God, was Allah, whatever that is, and I'm not here to challenge anybody's belief, but however you know yourself to come to this, you have to know that whatever created you didn't create you to have a 9 to 5 for you to pay bills, trash yourself over the weekend, survive, go back to your job on Monday and do it all over again. I know that for a fact. And if you don't know it, that's the reason, one of the reasons why you're here. Because that's not. So when you figure out what your purpose is, it's when your lights go on. So when we know that somebody sees us based on what that is, and it's like, I've had to have this conversation with the women in my life. My mother, my wife, my daughter. For me, with your work, it like, my assignment is to be a protector provider. Not just providing financially, because that's not the true value of what it is that we provide. I provide stability in my house. I provide a calmness in my house. That's my biggest currency that I provide. As a protector, imagine the assignment, because this is what you're looking at out here, at these pieces. As a man whose assignment it is to be a protector, how do you do that when you feel unsafe every day? And so what your work is an expression of like how we have to grow through all of that in order to become ultimately the man where that helmet actually fits. Not that it's comfortable, but it actually fits, because I know this is my time. This is my assignment, and I gotta work through all that. So for me, even like this piece where you see this young brother right here, and the like the crown, and you got I see. I lost my father three times in my life. When I was 13, when he went to prison. For 13 years, I didn't see him again until I was 26. And I was on all my children at the time. I was doing well for myself. I bought myself a house. You know, I had me a foreign. My boy hits me. I grew up in Brooklyn. My boy hits me. He's like, yo, man, your pops is out. So I drive from my house in Jersey, and I find my father. When I was 6 years old, my father kidnapped me from my mother. In the middle of the night, about 3:30 in the morning, almost 4 o'clock, I wake up in the back seat of his car, and he's nowhere around. So I had to navigate my way back to my mother. At 26 years old, exactly 20 years later, that happened to me at the hands of my father, I picked my father up. I showed him the life that I had. I drove him far away from where he lived, and then I kicked him out of my car because I wanted him to feel the exact same abandonment that I felt. I wasn't the man that I am now, so I did not know, I didn't have, the only skill set I had was what Brooklyn taught me, which is when somebody causes you pain, your assignment is to cause them pain. And I told my father, if I ever see you again, I'm gonna kill you. It wasn't until 20 years later, again, my daughter sits down next to me and says, Dad, do you know where your father is? No segue. We never even had a conversation about this. I knew God was telling me, go reconcile with your father. I fly back to New York because living here, we reconcile. We have 6 years. My father passed last year, but if I didn't have that 6 years of reconciliation, of restoration, I would have died a horrible death because I knew that I kept that connection for myself. So when I look at that painting right there, it is a symbol of me losing my father, because that's what my father would have been had he not been locked up. So that expression is for so many of us who lose our fathers who are supposed to give us the information and instruction to be able to navigate this life. So bro, your work, man, is like, it is so, there's so much accurate expression in our experience, man. Like, it is supremely powerful, bro.
Facts.
I love it, man.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing that, bro. Thank you, sincerely.
Big time. And just to add on to that, like, same thing with the father. Father was in prison growing up, got out, totally different. But what enlightens me about your story and also the curatorial placement is when you get a chance, everybody, just look at the distance between this piece and the piece that Dre and I was talking about. Every piece in between these two works is the struggle of every black kid in America. Trying to stay out of here. And when you have them face, that's why I think Dre's so emotional, because he's looking at that, he's trying to battle not being in goddamn prison. His helmet, his mouth is covered, as a black male, you can say the wrong thing, you end up in jail. You're fighting through so many of these emotions, these stages of your humanity, of your reality, to not end up as this ball. The curatorial placement of the show is one of the things that I've really enjoyed about it, along with the work, but just being able to think about where things are placed in life. You being an artist, 2012 might not have went well for you. But the placement for you right now is exactly where you're supposed to be. These pieces are where they're supposed to be. Him seeing that is where it's supposed to be. Everyone here is where they're supposed to be. And I like to think about that in the art terms of like, people like to create what they want to sell. We talked about that in the beginning, but it's like, do you usually create where you want to be? You know, the thought about it. As a kid, you would create, be a fireman, be an NBA player, draw yourself with the Bulls jersey on, 23. Have you painted yourself as the future you get? Have you seen your journey? I mean, this, of course, it's all of our journey, but have you painted your personal, experience yet? And if so, how does it relate to the works in here? I know it's a long question.
It is, no, and I think it's interesting because I think I paint a reflection of myself in all of this. Like, I'm lighter skinned. I paint a darker skin tone typically. I live in Iowa. I do that intentionally. Let me tell you, I'm so damn intentional. It did not make sense when I started painting in 2020 to focus on my biracial identity. It was not smart because we were united as black, period. There was no subcategory, no third category. We were all one family. But for me to uplift an image was much more for me to focus on a darker melanin or complexion than a biracial or mixed identity, even though I relate with us all shades. But one time when I was in first grade, a kid said I was black, and before that I always thought I was mixed, because that's what I used to say when I was younger. I try to say biracial now, but it's still hard. But someone had to tell me I was black, because I just thought I was in this middle category. But then after I started getting bullshit happening to me, I was like, oh, I'm definitely on this side. There's no question. I stayed on that side. I'm still on that side. But I'm also half and half. So that's why this piece over here, this middle child Messiah, was such an important piece, because that was me. That was me as a missionary, as a Jesus coming from heaven to speak and communicate, talk truth, try to connect two worlds, try to connect a traditional art world with an independent art world, a white community with a black community. That's my goal, is connection and community. You guys, most people know me, and if you haven't, you'll get to know. I'm so relationship-based. Everyone that has my work I talk to, it's all community. So as I see myself the most in that work as I was developing this body of work, but post this show, that's going to change. Because I've also realized, being self-taught and so newer in this world, how important it is to also occasionally document me, like specifically me. So the first thing I did when I got home, actually like a week and a half ago, is I painted a self-portrait. It's the first one I've ever did that I'm gonna actually release. It got grabbed like that off my stories, and I'll keep it private for now, but again, not everything's transactional, not everything's for sale, but this is me putting myself into the world so people can see me in true form. And that's an evolution, because I don't think everyone's comfortable to paint themselves. And as I've built this brand and this narrative, it's a really good opportunity for me to now slowly move through my specific identity that should bridge two worlds. And I hope to have a room. I love how black the rooms are that I have when I have shows or collectors. I have a very black and brown community, and that's been intentional without discrimination. But I look forward to the day when I have a blended room who are equally invested in how important my work connects. What a challenge. Let me tell you, I'm ready to do this. Let me challenge myself to see if I can provoke the same response to this work and have the same response to the half of the room being white. Do you know how much of a challenge? I can't tell you, because I don't know. That is a huge feat, to be able to be so authentic in my storytelling, in our triumph, in our trauma, and still be able to have that be relatable on a personal level to a black identity and a white identity. Because usually it's more of empathy when it's received by the white side. That's not bad. It's just some of our trauma is received with empathy, and I wouldn't want it to be received any other way necessarily. But I think empathy sometimes is purchased. Purchased because there's either an understanding, purchased because for the wrong reasons, I think sometimes. Purchased also because of guilt, subconsciously or not. So I see myself in all of this work. I see all of us in all of this work. And I wanted to have some more girls in here too, but that will be in the future. Because when I did all these photo shoots in my community, I got a ton of photos. I can't wait to do the body with girls because I couldn't use any of those photos for painting this. And I'm like, oh, that's such a good photo, and it would be so amazing. But I wasn't trying to force nothing.
Well, the sister that's in this room is in that phone call.
And on that wall, yeah.
And I, like in walking around, and I think I spoke to you, and you said, yo, did you pick up the phone yet? And I was like, oh, my bad, I didn't even realize, I was so wiped out. He was like, yo, pick up the phone, but be ready. And when I picked up the phone, and I heard that, I heard so many women in my life. And about what it's like in having a man that they love so much, a young man that they love so much, have to be out there and have to be in the middle of that war, and what it's like to be on pins and needles about whether you're, traversing the battlefield properly. Tell us about how you came to incorporate that as it relates to the work in the room.
I'm glad you brought that up. I wasn't going to forget about it, but I'm glad you did, because we want to still have some time for some Q&A and stuff. But I don't know what time check is, so I ain't trying to rap or anything. But that phone, Art Melanated, Sol Aponte and Jania Frederick helped kind of put that together for me. But my concept, it was mine, it was my idea. And it's nostalgic, because most of our grandmas, or a lot of our grandmas, had those rotary phones with the cord. And my grandma smoked and always had a Jet magazine or a TV guide, either one or both, maybe a Reader's Digest on her little end table, and a lamp, always a lamp. And so when I recreated this, I was thinking, I like diversity, and I like to speak to the different human languages and communications that we respond to. It could be touch, it could be smell, it could be audio, it could be sight, and usually art's just seen. But I say this a lot, I think art should be felt and not just seen, whether you paint it or it's another form. So with this phone, it was experimental, but it was more of a social, interactive piece, because I really wanted to see, voicemails are so important. If you miss a call and you miss that person, it could be a really important phone call, and it could be the last one. Sometimes voicemails are something that we save, and usually they matter the most when the person is no longer with us. So I was just like, I just remember that phone in my grandma's house so many times, picking it up, answering it, dialing in to listen to the voicemail, all of that. So with that piece, I worked with my community, and a few of these pieces was community-based. I mentioned Art Melanated helped me with the technology of putting the phone together, but one of my friends and collectors, actress Vanessa Williams' voice is actually on that recording, and we're all kind of like friends and similar. It's been a very authentic, beautiful thing that's happened because it's community being built, it's relationships, and the art is like connecting us, but it's not based on transaction. It's based on connection. And so her using her voice and her being a Black mother, it was a very authentic audio and an interactive way for me to provoke an emotion and a response. There's a table tent or a little tag over there that says pick up phone, voicemail waiting, and there's an audio if you listen to it. But it also says trigger warning if Black, because it is very real. And I know when them street lights come on, which those pieces kind of go together, they actually do. When those street lights come on, your ass is supposed to be home. And so Mama's calling out from her missing child.
You know what's really interesting? When I walked up on that piece, the homie Pig, he was like, yo, like, pick up the phone and went together and all of that. But I just saw that, again, from my experience of my father, also being next to this, you know, growing up in Philly, I was expecting you have a collect call from an inmate at CF, and you know what I mean? Like, I was expecting to hear that on my grandmother's table because my father was locked up.
That came across my mind too.
You know what I mean? Like, that's the first thing you hear on that phone. It's like, all right, you have a call from an inmate at a correctional facility, you know, at such and such and such, and I'm like, oh, press 9. You know, all right, my dad's calling. What's good, Dad? How's it going? Oh yeah, school was cool. How you doing? You know what I mean? Like, and it's a lot of nostalgia. Again, it's like all of these scenes are in all of our lives, and we experience them in different ways. And it's very, very almost healing to be up here to share these, because it's like, I know I'm not the only one, but sometimes you need to know.
Yeah.
It ain't just you. You know what I mean? Like school loans and shit says.
No, and you know what's crazy is like, this is new. It's my first show. Some of the stuff was experimental. I was trying to see what reactions I would get, what emotions would be provoked. That phone, I felt it. I was like, man, this is gonna be powerful. I'm gonna mess some people up with this. But I wasn't trying to be, you know, focused on the pain, because I knew it was an emotional roller coaster. I wanted people to leave a little lighter. If they really went in the room in the right way, that was my intention. But that phone, even after doing it once as a prototype, let's look at it as a prototype. Let's see, that's my first interactive audio art piece. As a creator and as an artist, when you find something that like gets a reaction and it's the first time you did it, let me speak for all of us. We run towards that shit. So for me, man, there's multiple things in this room. I've already started. I've been back home and back here, and like I'm ready to go because I love LA, but like man, I'm on fire right now and like burning inside with ideas, and like that phone was the birth of something that was intentional and familiar and nostalgic, but it's based on trauma, and voicemails aren't always. So I hope this specific, just that one install evolves in what I see already as an experience room, a room activation where we go through these different experiences that we've shared, happy birthday wishes, last call from a parent, an inmate call, a stressed mother, I just made it into college, and just see how I can provoke emotions. Because I know when we feel art, I don't know if there's anything better in terms of art, because it stays with you and it comes back up in different ways, and it might even inspire you. So I don't know what we are on time, but I do want to make sure we have time for questions, and I did want to speak to one work in particular for film reasons, for documentation reasons, and just further context. Everything I do is very intentional. Not everyone will see it, but I encourage you all to look at it later if you haven't already. There's one piece that's on this adjoining wall that's a little bit out of our view next to the memorial wall with the flags. And it's titled American Dream Snatcher. It's got the presentation of a dream catcher, a Native American dream catcher. I wanted to share this because I grew up in Iowa where we hunt, like deer and pheasants and stuff, and it's kind of part of the culture, especially in the rural areas. It's kind of country. And on the slave auction blocks, black males were described in different tones as bodied, able, strong, bucks. We were described like animals. So I actually took buck, leather, skin, and I took branding rods, and I branded the word nigger on the deer hide, the buck hide, because that's permanently branded on us, and it isn't nothing that we put on ourselves. And I titled it American Dream Snatcher, is because this ain't a dream catcher being caught in Africa and brought here. Our dreams were snatched. So that piece is deep. Sometimes it's provocative. That's some of my favorite art. I grew up in a very Christian, conservative upbringing. So I was judged a lot based on my outward appearance before people got to know me. So often with my art, I try to provoke this thing that might be like, ooh, and then like, I almost want those people to be flushed out. So the people that lean in and read and get to know are my people. I don't need that. So that piece in particular, I wanted to share. And I wanted to also share, there's some confusion for me too, and I look at the definition of a native. And being ripped from my homeland, my ancestors, and then being born natively here. It's kind of a muddy area where I'm not sure, without taking away anything from indigenous people who are native to this land, this subcategory of Black Americans somewhat being like pseudo-native to America too. So I wanted to share that, and I wanted to open it up to kind of some Q&A for folks. I don't even know what we're sitting at on time. Anybody got like a 5 or a 10? Okay, so we went over a little bit, but you want to take the next 5-10 minutes or so, no rush. Just open it up. Hopefully y'all have a question or two that we didn't cover, but. Yes, you bet.
I have a comment on your American Dream stature. It gave me emotion when I noticed you hung the branding, I don't know what you call them, but actually on the piece, and you can see the lettering. And that to me was powerful, like what you said about being branded,
Yeah.
right? As a Black person in this country, it brought. So keep doing things. That was so subtle. Because first I was like, oh, this is nice, and then I looked down and I saw the actual branded rods.
Yeah.
And that brought the emotion out of me. So thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Yeah, I got online and I learned a lot of stuff during this creation. So I was like, well, I need to get some real authentic branding rods, and how do you heat those up? And I had my dad, I was like, maybe I heat them up on some coals on the grill, and I'm glad that you noticed that I brought those in and kept those as part of not only the process, but the final presentation too, because it was actually the tool being used. So thank you for that.
Yeah, hi. First of all, congratulations on your show.
Thank you.
Considering like you've just been painting since 2019, that's amazing. I mean, obviously you've had you've been an artist for your whole life, and you're just creating. I wonder, like, as a collector, what kind of collections would you like to see your work go to, or collectors? Is there any specific, type?
If I were to I take pride in my independency because I can strategically work with institutions and galleries, but I take pride in it mostly is because I have full control over some of the relationships I have. And looking at the ecosystem of the art world, a lot of collectors that fit a minority category have been under-marginalized and have been denied access to art as a collecting asset. So it's my duty to try to prioritize those people that have been under-prioritized. But I have about a 75-25, 80-20 split. 75% of people that look like me, and then other. So I don't discriminate, I prioritize. That's all. I'm half Black and half white, so there's no discrimination. But to take it even a little further outside of race, some of my coolest stories, let me tell you. Taye Diggs, his first original painting was from me. You would think Taye Diggs has a house full of art. Brother's now buying art and shit now, not just my stuff. I got so many stories like that, where the first original art was purchased was mine. And I love how that works because I know I can't produce enough work based on demand to feed everyone that just wants B Moore's work. And it's an unhealthy perspective as a collector too, to just have one person's work. But the natural ecosystem that works behind that is other artists benefit. And it begins an ecosystem and a new passion and asset building. And so now I notice my peers are starting to get brought into these collections, or even in reverse. I'm the one that's getting brought in, and my peers were the ones that were in there first. So I really am trying to make access something that's a priority. Yeah, what's up?
I just want to acknowledge how dope this is to see you guys speaking as brothers about art. I mean, it's dope because I tell people all the time, I feel like universally we're in this energy shift. If you listen, then you're going to be on this wave, and there's a lot of inner reflection that has been demanded during like the COVID pandemic process. I also got my superpower in art at the same time. And so I have a double question. I think it's dope that you as a collector are up here talking. I was able to blessed to have my artist talk, and I had my first collector do the artist talk with me. But just to hear that you guys never had a conversation and how you broke that down, that piece, just as from an artist's perspective, I think that's one of the dopest things, because that immediately tells me you're not trying to flip this. You're now already being a student, you're going to protect this. And so what I mean by protection for you specifically, man, I also create from like an inner child. I think my hat says grown kid, but I create from an inner child, and I'm independent as well. So I ask you, how do you foresee, because you also do, you said you're big on data, and a child doesn't have a lot of data. They're just exploring this world through their imagination, and they're just learning as they go. But as they get older, they start shelling up because they receive so much data, and it has changed their perspective. So I'm asking you intentionally, because I'm intentional as well, like as an artist, an independent artist, how are you going to protect that? How do you foresee yourself protecting that inner child that you create with, that has blessed everyone with your presence? And then also, as you keep getting data, how are you going to, keep that in your work and, the purity that you created? Because data could be crippling or it could be free.
You're right. Yeah, you're right. I think data tells me a story. So I don't necessarily look at it as just numbers. It informs me. It informs my emotions. But my emotions still are raw. So my emotions are raw, just like the inner child. Some of this stuff, all of this is just true. I'll tell you what, give me 1,000 spreadsheets and maybe I'm just different. I'm never letting go of that inner child. I love, and I wish I would have held on to more of it. So I'm even working through this work to find more of it. I'm not trying to find the elder man of Be More. I'm actually trying to find that inner child, because that freedom when I paint, not looking at what other people are doing. Being a kid, bouncing around, being like, I'm going to the LACMA for the first time like 3 months ago. Like, dude, I don't know half the names I'm looking at. I literally feel like a kid. I don't even want to be on Instagram anymore, because I just want to be in my shit. I want to be in my studio. I know exactly what my life experiences are. Now I'm confident that they're overlapping, and being black in Iowa isn't just this real unique experience. Blackness is a shared experience. And man, that's a tough question though. I think if I were to share that, if I were to answer that question the way I wish I needed to hear it without being here, it would be, use the data, don't let the data use you, and always be a kid. And if you're not a father, I'm not giving that prescription, but if you have kids in your life, stay connected with them, because that will keep your child present. That's the best way for me to answer that. That's a tough question. That's probably one of the toughest ones of the day.
Also, like with the data being, tech background, it's like kids have a lot of data. They just don't know how to sort it. They don't know what they're looking at yet. We're inundated with, there's data in here right now, and being a tech person, I think that way, and it goes back to, the DNA question, the mud question, everything. It's like, how do you now sort that to now tell the story? Because data can tell a story, it might not be the story, because you can make numbers look like whatever you need them to look like. So how do you allow the data that you're collecting, that you're receiving, how are you translating that to your viewer? He translated that data to amazingly. Now, can you bottle that up and make every collector feel like him. That's my challenge to you. Because if he speaks for your work, you sell everything.
Oh, he doesn't know I got a contract being drafted up right now with very nice compensation.
I wouldn't step in until he walked in first.
You know what? That's why I think these authentic conversations are beautiful, and it can even be critique. Let me tell you what, I love the connection and the communion, but criticism and rejection, if you respond correctly, is actually how all this started. I had a boss in 2019 tell me she didn't think I was authentic, and I was working a corporate job like he described till Thursday waiting for happy hour to use cocaine and alcohol and run the cycle back every week. Hell no, I wasn't being authentic. Man, I was buttoning up a tie and talking funny just so I would get a raise. That wasn't me. And my ex-wife even was like, look at these tattoos and these dreads. And I look at her and I'm like, you know I should have always been this way. I just was forcing myself not to be. So it's like, man, just keep doing that work that challenges yourself. I also did this work because I'm so new to the art world. Every art show I've been to, not everyone, but mainly in galleries, beautiful work. There's no cohesive narrative, even when a curator takes their time to put a theme together. I've been in group shows and I've been like, man, fool, what is that? I spent 3 months doing research, trying to make sure I aligned with the curator's theme, and you just threw something up on the wall. I don't never want to show with you again. Because you ain't, like on a football or basketball team, bro, you ain't passing the rock. Pass the rock, that basketball right there, made with concrete, that's intentionally titled. It's also science meets art. If I hold that ball by my damn self, it's heavy. If me and Dondre hold that ball together, it's lighter. If all three of us hold that ball together, it's even lighter. But what obligation do we have to also pass the rock? If you don't pass the ball in a game, don't care if you're Kobe, you're going to lose. All of this was super intentional. I haven't even hit the surface of the depths of the intentionality in the materials, in the substrate, in the composition, in the narrative. I wrote, created, curated. I challenge everyone to dig in deep. I did this as a challenge to myself, but as rejection and criticism, you self-reflect, you self-critique. This is also a challenge for other artists. I had a conversation the other day and someone was like, this feels like a museum. This is insane, this is crazy. Totally dope, like compliment. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I was going for. Then they were like, man, I would like to see galleries doing this more. And I literally looked at them and I said, why don't they? Why are museum experiences so focused in museums? Why can't galleries do this more? And I'm not saying that galleries don't, but there's an opportunity to activate space. And when Andrew in the gallery said, you get the big room, 15 plus paintings is what they said to me, at first I was like, oh shit, I don't know if I can do that. I literally thought that at first. Then I was like, nope, shutting that noise down. I gotta go heavy. I'm gonna pretend like he said 20 paintings because not everything's gonna make it. And I'm gonna challenge myself, and it's not easy, but it's just that repetition and that diamonds aren't made under pressure, you know, giving yourself that right amount of pressure and rest. I don't know if I answered it, but hopefully I gave you some sauce to go create something that challenges yourself and is better than before, because if you've been doing this for a couple years and you're still doing it, you're doing something right.
I feel like you got to do a piece that is the expression of how so many of us suppress who we really are on the inside for that external validation or acceptance.
So I recently did a piece. It's called Incognito. It's 2 pieces of linen, and the top piece is Tom, more of a lighter skinned Caucasian. I cut the eyes almost all the way out of the top piece of linen, and underneath is Super Negro, the black man that goes and puts on this mask every day in corporate world and is hiding who he really is, that Clark Kent on top, that Super Negro underneath. And it's crazy that, see, this is what keeps happening. on these ancestral spiritual.
You know where I'm going with that, right?
I don't know where you're going, but I just heard where he was going, and I'm like, so that's why I didn't even mean to. I don't know where you're going.
It reminds me of that. I don't know if everybody's seen that Titus Kafar piece,
Where he cuts out.
where he not only like paints out all of the historical, but he has a veil over. I think it's Sally Hemings, but it's Thomas Jefferson, but it's lift up. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
And it was part of Black American Portraits. Yes. That piece is, that's what I'm saying. Like, you understand art history. You might not know the names, but you retain information. And that's good of a researcher. We talked about at the beginning about collecting. Like, you have collector habits, with research, with being able to formulate what you see around you to bring it into your space and translate it and give it back to the world in a way that you do. So subconsciously, like, I don't even know if you've seen that painting or not, but subconsciously, again, that experience of understanding that, it's like, man, there's relatable elements that's already in these institutions, to where if you build and just continue to be you with your DNA, collect what you've been doing, you'll eventually reach. I mean, you've already got one, so earlier, congrats, Thinkspace, and be more on that, Moa and Lancaster, it's amazing, but you'll continue to do more. You're destined to be there. What else to say?
Man, thank y'all. If there's any more questions, of course, we'll keep it open, but I just want to say thank y'all to the community at a peer level, at a collector level, at just a community level. This is not a transactional thing. I value human currency so much, and these conversations I have are usually what feeds that inner child. It feeds the inner creator, even one-on-one or a larger scale. I just got soul food today, and so I thank y'all for that very much.
Thank you, B.
Thank y'all. Thank you, B. For sure. Thank you.